Materialism has radically transformed the way we think. This is what the sages and the mystics were warning us about. It wasn't really about greed. That's just the cover story. For something to be true, it has to be eternal. That means it's true in all conditions and times. We want to believe now that there's a big difference between the past and the present. We want to believe that we've advanced tremendously. We have advanced materially and regressed spiritually. That's the way it all works. Everything has to stay in balance. That's the way light and dark work, and that's the way everything else in this binary system works. To think it's any other way is to invite catastrophe. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 10:57 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday, the 8th of May, and we're going to do a second chapter on the human devil. So, yesterday I introduced you to Karin Hustebot. In many ways, she was a motivation to write this book, The Devil in Us, although she factors into it very little. No matter what your best intent is when you start with a book, unless it's like a manual or something more technical, if it's a creative project, it's never going to be what you think it is at the beginning. If there's any writers who listen to me, it's a magical process writing a book. It's an exploration of the spontaneity of creativity and what happens in the moment and how best to convey information, what form, what kind of language, and what is it that you're really trying to say. And very often you don't even know until you get down and you get into it, and it happens kind of in the moment while you're doing it. But Karin ended up factoring into the human devil in a large way. So, I have some things to say tonight that I suppose you could say that they are, difficult to say, at least insofar as they swim against the norm. They go against the norm of what's going on now, what people should say or what they want you to say, and all of these sorts of things. But that doesn't really matter to me. Never has, never will. I'm going to say what I want to say. And I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. Fortunately for me, there's no laws against that where I live right now. I might be arrested if I were still living in Canada. So for those of you who've read my work, The Light of Darkness and The Devil in Us, you may have asked yourself, how true are these things? How epidemic are these things that Bruce writes about? How widespread are these things that Bruce writes about? Well, among common people, not that much. Not that much at all. But in the leadership and influencer class, and I don't mean social media influencer, I mean real influencers, lobbyists, think tanks, non-governmental organizations, all of these sorts of things. It's fairly important. It's fairly big, this culture. Now, most of the people, well, that's a bold statement. I don't know if it's most. Many of the people in power today were placed there. Now, you could make the case that, well, they've been placing people in power for decades, Bruce. What's different about today? What's different about today is the kind of people we're getting. They're all people who hate normal people. Normal people are people who just live, worship God in whatever fashion, follow natural law, procreate, have children, and try to be happy. No great ego, no great ambition. Doesn't mean that they don't achieve things, they do. But they just don't have that ego that wants to throw them out into the world and be a big name. I did. In my 20s, I wanted to be a world-famous writer. But that's more by talent. And that's something that it was a goal I set, no different than somebody wanting to make the NHL or the NBA or anything like that. These people are a different kind of people. And more, our politics have turned into a kind of mockery. So we're in a giant ritual right now. It's a death ritual. They're killing people right now. And they're mocking us with the kinds of leaders they give us, who are deaf to our pleas for help, our pleas for leadership, our pleas for guidance, our pleas to be defended by our governments, by our police, in every way, shape, and form. And as you go through social media, what you see are a lot of point-specific things. Like, I don't know, like, let me think of one here. Okay, so the liberal justice systems in Democrat states under George Soros financed district attorneys. The treatment of Trump, I would say, is an example of it. Okay, the treatment of Trump is definitely an example of it. Although that doesn't, please don't take that to mean that I think Trump is the Mashiach. I think he would definitely do a better job at this point in history than Joe Biden. For the life of me, I can't understand people who I previously regarded as intelligent, who cannot see this. Bill Maher comes to mind. There's a certain benefit I gain now from my understanding and experience with darkness. Because if you have no experience with darkness, you don't believe it exists. And if you don't believe it exists, you certainly don't know it exists. And if you don't know it exists, you don't recognize it. You just don't recognize it. Okay? Again, this falls to awareness, intuition, spiritual guidance, spiritual vision. Very similar to my low-key ghost story, which, as I said in that podcast, nothing like the Insidious movie, nothing like a ghost story, the normal ghost story, nothing like a haunting. It's just through attention to inner self and slight details in your outer reality that are too coincidental, meditating upon them, and then coming to a conclusion, yes, this was a spirit, and then having it crest. And the crest was when we returned to Toronto and we got the news that it was the 7-year anniversary of this young man's death at the age of 17. So it's the same thing with politics. It's the same thing with physical reality. There's aspects of physical reality that are, in a sense, metaphysical, like the ghost experience. if you're not mindful, if you're not bringing consciousness to the situation, you don't see it. It just goes right over your head. You literally don't see it. It's like it's invisible to you. And this has to do with the law of frequencies. Okay, there's a law of frequency in the universe. And the more you open your consciousness, the more dimensions you can engage in meditation, the more sensitive you become. And you pick up things that other people don't pick up. This is why I moved here. My son is my witness. I've been in Costa Rica 10 years now. And when I came over, I was here for a couple years before my son came over. When we came over, I had already raised my son from about the age of 10 or 11. I started to tell him what the future was going to be. And it's not because I'm a prophet. There are certain... Those cats are getting a little bothersome. There are certain conditions that go into anything. Okay? So, if you go to a nursery and you buy some plastic pots and some fertilizer and some black earth, and you put, let's say, tomato seeds in them, and you want to grow tomato plants, and you buy some nitrogen, okay? But you've never gardened before. You don't really know how much nitrogen to put in. If you put too much nitrogen in, you're going to burn the seed, and it's not going to grow. If you overwater it, it's not going to grow. So what I'm getting at here is there are certain things that make a seed grow. It's simple cause and effect. There's nothing metaphysical or prophetic about it. And it's the same thing with a society. You can tell by what a government is doing what their intent for that society is. I could see the murderous intent in Western civilization as early as 2002, 22 years ago. It came to me first meditatively, like I came out of meditation and I said they're going to depopulate a whole bunch of people. This is how meditation works. When you get, let's call it a realization. And then once you have the realization, which your mind couldn't have given you, the mind cannot give you a realization. The mind can calculate. Calculation and realization are two completely different things. A computer can calculate, it can't realize anything. And this is why I think the entire thing about artificial intelligence is complete horseshit. Artificial... I don't know, maybe it can confuse some traffic lights if it gets angry and kill some people. But I don't think it's really worthy of all of the things that we're hearing about it. And I realize I'm disagreeing with some very powerful intellects on the planet, like Elon Musk and many others, the former head of AI at Google. But it only matters if you live that life, if you live in a society that is going to employ AI. The AI revolution doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to the Kebakar Indians. Doesn't matter to the river by my house. Doesn't matter to the jungle. Doesn't matter to the mountains. Doesn't matter to the jaguars. Doesn't matter to my dogs. It doesn't matter. If it matters in your life, it's because you're living in their system and you should have gotten out already. And getting out doesn't mean you have to do something as exotic as what I did. You can get out even in your own country. Just go to a safe rural part of your own country, make sure you buy a property that has an existing well, have the water tested. There you go. Massive increase to your health right there. You're drinking untreated water, unfluoridated water. Do you know how much that changes your life right out of the gate? That's just one thing. So the AI really doesn't matter all that much. Not in the grander scheme of things. At the end of the day, it requires electricity. And we may be getting ourselves into a conflict here so serious that electricity won't matter. Electricity won't be around. I know that sounds grievous, but it's possible, given what NATO was trying to do. Now, the human devil is a human being that is either, could be a number of things. They could be spiritually bothered. They could be possessed. They could be gone. They could be out of their body and something else walked in. And believe me when I tell you, there are way more things in this regard than just the simple things you've been told in Christianity and Islam. What do you got there? Okay, if you take Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all together, you've got the angelic orders given to us by the Torah. You get more of a focus on the demons in Christianity. And then this new entity called jinn enter in the Quran. Okay? What is that? Less than 10 things. Cherubim, seraphim, archangels, angels, demons, and jinn. Folks, there are literally thousands of things. Thousands. Our theology is kindergarten theology. And specifically because they don't want you to know what's out there. And the vast majority of it is good, not bad. We focus on the bad on this planet and in our cultures in the West because the creatures that rule us prefer us to be in a state of fear. It's easier to control us. Now, before I work up to what they do with children, as it pertains to the human devil, I'm going to talk about the kinds of leaders we're getting now. Okay? So, let's take a look at this. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a photo compilation or a video compilation that was put together of various scenes of Emmanuel Macron dancing in nightclubs from when he looks to be in his early 20s, maybe mid or late 20s, it's hard to tell. Let's take a look. So he's a twink. He's a catamite. In classical Greek language, the root of this, the Greeks got kind of freaky sexually as well. Okay? The catamite is the one who plays the role of the woman. The pederast is the one who plays the role of the man. So Emmanuel Macron is a catamite. I'm just going to say it in plain language. He likes getting fucked in the ass. He likes being a woman. But he's not a woman because he can't bear children and he doesn't have a vagina. Why is this important? Because that fucking twink is about to start World War III. The French Foreign Legion is being sent to the Ukrainian front lines. Do you feel comfortable with that fucking twink starting a war? Okay, I got a lot to get off my chest today. I gotta be careful how I word things. Except for very rare exceptions, homosexuality is almost always demonic behavior. It's demonic. It's ritualistic. And it's a sure sign that you were abused as a child. 95%, 99% of the human beings in the alternative sexuality movement were somehow sexually traumatized in their formative years. The remaining 1% or 2% are genuine homosexuals. And they do occur in nature. Every society recognizes them. China, India. They have a whole caste of hermaphrodites in India. People born with both female and male genitalia. It happens. You can't argue with nature. You can't look at the Bible and say that's a sin. It's not a sin. And this is where these people come in. They just like in the winter, the draft comes in with just the slightest crack in the door. The Satanists, they come in these little gray areas. And what they do is they use homosexuality as a cover, as camouflage, as a smokescreen, to get something else going in the public, in the background. Something much more nefarious than just two men loving each other or two women loving each other because they're genuinely lesbian or they're genuinely gay. And the demonic aspect of it is completely and utterly perverse. They're involved in that sexuality because that's what gets them off. Because they haven't reconciled their trauma. They're sadists or masochists. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. There's no loving way to fuck a man in the ass. It's extremely painful for the receiver. Talk to any nurse. And if you have any nurses in your family who work in hospitals, ask them about anal polyps, anal rupturing, tearing of the sepsis or blood poisoning as a result of tearing of the anal lining. The anus is not an erogenous zone. It's very delicate. Okay? Very delicate. One of the earliest examples in public we get of this kind of debauchery is the French nobleman and writer, the Marquis de Sade, from where we get the word sadist. It's from the Marquis de Sade. He's most famous for a book, and he goes back a couple hundred years. He's most famous for a book called 101 Days of Sodomy. It's a vile book. I've never read it. It's just vile. If you study any of the biographical material about Aleister Crowley, you'll find a lot of weird sex stuff too. Not necessarily, if it's not homosexual, it's the orgies. It's taking the sacred and spiritual nature of union between one man and one woman to share love and open up to each other, and expanding it not only to multiple people, but to strangers, people you've never met before. That's another form of perversion. And all of this fetishistic behavior, like drug use, it just grows. And that's your first indication that it's problematic, is it grows. You just kind of want to push it and push it and push it and push it. It's very similar to drugs. Although I think it's a lie when they say that marijuana is a gateway drug. I know all kinds of people who are just happy smoking weed and they don't feel any need to do cocaine or heroin or anything else, LSD or mushrooms, or they just like to smoke weed the way some people like to come home and have a few beers. But when you get into like the drug culture, one example of it is heavy drinkers, maybe 5-10 years into their drinking career. And a heavy drinker is somebody who goes out to drink 4 or 5 nights a week. I have friends in Toronto who, Scottish guys, they're functioning alcoholics. And they'll go to the bar 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, their alcohol habit is so out of hand that the bill for their drinking bill on a monthly basis exceeds their rent. I have friends who spend between $1,500 and $2,000 a month on booze. They literally change their lifestyle to have enough disposable income to drink that much. Now, what I noticed in all of these guys that drink a lot is that at a certain point in their journey, they get into cocaine. Not because they enjoy cocaine, because cocaine rebases them doing a few lines, and they can keep drinking another 6 hours on a Saturday night rather than passing out. So addictive behavior stuff, this is one of the things that tells us that what we're doing is wrong. That you always want more and more and more and more in these fetishistic behaviors. And it's the same with what I consider to be the ultimate fetish, which is the occult, is the ultimate fetish. Okay? So let's take a look now at Macron's husband, okay? So that's clearly was a man, is pretending to be a woman. I don't think that's even a tranny. And this came out. Candace Owens did a piece on it, and when she had her debate with Rabbi Shmuley, he chastised her for talking about it. The Jews are really into this stuff too. It's a demonic religion, Judaism. If you haven't figured out they worship a dark entity yet, you're just not paying attention. I'm not pulling my punches anymore. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that all Jews are bad. The vast majority of Jews are just like the vast majority of Christians. They're culturally associated with Judaism, but they're not going to synagogue. They're not reading the Torah. Just like most Christians aren't going to church, they're not reading the Bible. But if you study the religion and you listen to the rabbis closely enough, they're pretty much telling you now. They want to tell you, because remember what I said last night. They want you to know because it increases their pleasure. Because they're extremely twisted people. Extremely twisted people. It's an absolutely demonic religion, and the third temple of Solomon will literally and figuratively be the embassy of hell on planet Earth. So that twink you saw in the Paris nightclubs from 20 years ago, married to that freak, and I'm sorry, I'm not pulling my punch. Those are not normal people. Okay? We all have gay friends and lesbian friends. They're normal. They don't lie to each other. They don't lie to us. These people are lying to us. If Macron was just a man and said, look, I'm gay, this is my husband or my wife, and that person showed up in a suit, a man, everyone would go, okay, he's gay. But what's with all the cloak and dagger stuff? And here's the really important question. Why is there so much of this now? Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, same thing. He's a twink, likes to get fucked in the ass. She's a tranny. Justin Trudeau. Here's the Prime Minister. So France has a president and a Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is appointed by the President. Here's the Prime Minister that was just appointed this week. That's the youngest Prime Minister in France's history. He's only 36. He's Jewish and he's gay. Then you've got Trudeau. Trudeau's gay. Don't be fooled by the family and the kids. His father did the same thing. Why Joe Biden is a pedophile? Probably hasn't fucked his wife Jill in 30 years. The diary came out where he's fondling his daughter in the shower. Why are there so many compromised deviants in position of power at a time in history when we're right on the knife's edge of living and dying as a civilization in the West? And these fucking twinks are the ones making the decisions about who goes to war, why we go to war. They're decadent, they're hedonists, they don't have any spiritual maturity. They're virtue signalers, they're ideologues, they're spiritually insubstantial, if not outright spiritually bothered or possessed or vacated. Trudeau's extremely dark. I'll get more into that in a future part of the Human Devil chapter. I need a special treatment of Trudeau. You're not going to believe how dark this guy is. And this is everywhere now. Now, these people are extremely angry. That's one of the reasons they've been put into power. Because they want to live a certain way. Society doesn't generally accept it. They have to lie to get voted in. Obama has to pretend he's not gay. doesn't like getting fucked in the ass by his big dick wife. Trudeau just got divorced. He's queer as a $3 bill. His father was as queer as a $3 bill. It was an open secret in the early 70s. I grew up in Ottawa. Those of you who've read The Devil in Us, A Memoir of You and Me, you know that. I grew up when Trudeau was Prime Minister. He led the country for most of my life. He got elected, I think the first time in 68 or 69, and then intermittently was the Prime Minister for most of the time, with a few little times where he was out of power. He was Prime Minister until the early 80s, right up until like 1982 or 84. I was born in 66, and I left Ottawa in 85 and moved to Toronto. So most of my life growing up was Trudeau. My old man hated the guy. Told us at the dinner table, this guy's a faggot. And me and my brother and sister were going, Dad, come on. The news would tell us. And my dad would say, okay, you don't want to hear it? Don't hear it. But I'm telling you, that guy's queer. And then when we got a little bit older and we could have slightly more mature conversations at 14 or 15, the old man would tell us. You know, as well known, queer as a $3 bill. And a catamite to boot, meaning he... So, look. A catamite to boot, meaning he liked to get fucked in the ass, which is extremely painful, which means you're a masochist, right? Sadism and masochism. It's a big part. There's a whole BDSM, rampant BDSM bondage, BDSM, sadomasochist, sexual sadomasochism subculture in the homosexual world. It's huge, huge. You talk to them, they're normal. We're abnormal because we all have these feelings and we're not expressing them. We're repressing them. So we're the ones with the deformed psychologies and they're normal. You believe that shit? Incredibly high number of homosexual people, gay people in Judaism as well. Tel Aviv is, I think, the gayest city in the world per capita. They used to do a lot of gay porn out of Tel Aviv. They may still do it, I don't know. So this is not biological homosexuality. This is what you need to understand. The homosexual is biologically homosexual, chemically homosexual. Doesn't need any trauma, doesn't need any incentive to be gay. You can see a truly gay man will be noticeable at 5 or 6 years old. And it's generally about 1% of the population, so 1 out of every 100 people. So if 35% of the population now in Gen Z is practicing homosexuality, what are those other 34% if only 1% are valid gay people, biologically gay, would meet the definition of that criteria in India, in China, and in other countries of the world? There's no tolerance for them in the Middle East. They're thrown off buildings in the Middle East. I don't agree with that, but it is the way it is. While I'm on this topic, it's interesting to me how we always criticize the Middle East for their treatment of women, and they force chastity on their and modesty on their women with the burqas. But nobody ever points out Britney Spears or all of these deformed, over-sexualized kids that went through the Disney machine. Like Britney Spears, like that, I forget her name. She's the daughter of another famous country singer, but she went through the Disney machine. And they got a bunch of pedophiles working there. I mean that literally. This has come out in the news. They've made arrests. Nickelodeon and and Disney. A bunch of pedophiles doing the children's programming. What is going on in this world? What in the fuck is going on in this world? Is this the way we end? In a state of absolute debauchery and decadence? Maybe it is. Maybe it's just a natural cycle of overindulgence and too much free time. It happened to Rome. But it's kind of pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. So a gay Jewish prime minister is going to be making, in France, is going to be making decisions about France's military response to the dilapidating Ukrainian defense of the front line. By the way, Ukraine has been almost completely depopulated. There are no more young breeding couples in Ukraine. Why do you think that is? Who wants Ukraine? Because nothing happens accident. They want you to think that this is accidental, or the accidental circumstance of a conflict nobody could have predicted. This conflict was provoked by the West, starting in 2014. They wanted this. And given that they wanted it, and they set Zelensky up to do it, did they not know through their own military analysis that there was no way they could beat Russia? I'd say no, there's no way they could. Every competent experienced military commentator operating in their own voice, in their own capacity, like Tucker Carlson since he left Fox, like Candace Owens since she left the Daily Wire. Every competent experienced military voice who could give qualified and quantitative analysis of the prospects of Ukraine winning a war with Ukraine said it was suicide. CNN, NBC, all the compromised voices, and again, have you noticed how many fucking twinks there are in the news? Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper, and they're fucking pedophiles too. Who are we kidding? You're going to make $5 million a year, be a sexual deviant, and not going to have kids sent to you? Of course you are. And this leads us to the gates of the cult, which is what the human devil is about. But this is the outer circle. These debauched homosexuals or pseudo-homosexuals, just sexually debauched deviants like Macron and Trudeau and Biden and Obama, they're just the outer circle of the cult. Just the outer circle. And they're put into power so that the cult can get what it needs done because they're compromised. Because they've got heinous shit on all of these people on video, Jeffrey Epstein style. Or they're raised in the cult, like Justin Trudeau. Okay? And that's how they get them to do what they want. You think it's a coincidence that New Zealand and Australia and Canada and the United States are all simultaneously introducing draconian censorship legislation, draconian non-criticism of Israel legislation, where you can go to fucking prison for criticizing Israel, who's trying to decimate the West as the stated goal of their rabbis? They do it because they're so debauched and self-involved. They'd rather continue their privileged, debauched life than stand up for... They can't even stand up for anything at this point in their career. They can't. They're fucking freaks. We're in a very, very bad position here. Very, very bad position. Everybody complains about the money sent to Ukraine, the money sent to Israel to support their war efforts. Those are just money laundering operations. It's my opinion that Israel knew about the October 7th attack, let it happen, sacrificed some of their own people, and then killed some of their own people. A lot of those people were killed by IDF helicopters. And then they just keep milking it and milking it and milking it the way they... You see, at the inner core of the Jewish cult, there's contempt even for Jews who don't live religiously. They just kill them just like they kill a goy. So where did the attack take place? It took place at a rave on the Sabbath. You think the rabbis care about those people? Doing MDMA and raving on the Sabbath? Taking recreational drugs? Of course they don't. Ukraine was entirely planned and engineered for the purpose of depopulating Ukraine. So the question you have to answer is, who wants Ukraine? Jews. There's an ancient enmity, centuries-old enmity between Jews and Ukrainians. Ukrainians did not like living with Jews. You'll see this enmity in any country that had a large Jewish diaspora. That's what happened in Germany, and it's happening in the United States now. The United States is starting to wake up. That, look, these people are not our friends, and they're running the country now. Every single significant cabinet position is Jewish. Most notably, the Secretary of State, Blinken, right? Who's really running the country now because Biden's completely out to lunch. So the most powerful nation in the world is being run by a guy who's completely loyal to Israel and wants to destroy the country he's representing. Wants to make them suffer. Number one, because they're Christian, primarily. Jews hate Christians. They can sort of tolerate Muslims, but not much. But at a religious level, they absolutely hate Christianity. Christ is their mortal enemy. Okay? I'm going to leave it there today. And I warn you, as we get into the human devil, it is very disturbing. Okay? It's very disturbing. And, prepare yourself. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.